There is a quote from Abraham Lincoln that is one of my favorites, and I'll admit right up front that I've seen the ongoing years-long debate about whether or not Lincoln actually said this or not. I believe that he did based on my research, but I'll admit there are people who make an argument that maybe he didn't. But even if he didn't, it sounds like something Lincoln would say. America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves. Well, I thought I'd talk about that with Frank Gaffney tonight, the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. Frank and I talk about things like the threat of China, the threat of Russia, threat of mad mullahs in Tehran, all kinds of threats, and most of them are outside the country. But now perhaps we have a threat from within our country, and that is our own government, a tyrannical government, if you will. Frank, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Lars. It's great to be with you, as always.
So it's great to have you on the program, and I'm glad for the work you do at the Center for Security Policy. So now the Attorney General has recruited U.S. Attorney John Durham to investigate, well, it's a whole cabal, as you put it, of FBI leadership figures, DOJ types, folks inside the intelligence business from some of the alphabet agencies like CIA, and I want to know whether or not you think he's the guy who can get to the bottom of this mess and then figure out how to stop any other future American government from ever using the levers and the wheels of government to be able to roll right over the rights of the people.
Well, let me just say, I don't know that there's any guarantee that there won't be abuses in the future, but one thing we can be pretty sure of is the present or certainly recent past abuses are not punished. If people are not held accountable for it, it's virtually guaranteed that there will be abuses, perhaps even more egregious ones in the future, though it's pretty hard to imagine how they could be more abusive than they now turn out to have been under the Obama administration. And I did want to just hasten to say, Lars, you set this up by talking about a tyrannical government. That's not the Donald Trump administration you're talking about.
No.
It is his predecessor, and the guys who tried to keep him from becoming president were responsible for these kinds of abuses that are now, increasingly coming to light, especially as they start turning on one another, evidently quite fearful, that they should be, of this U.S. Attorney John Durham, who's, if anybody's going to be able to get to the bottom of this, Lars, my guess is it's going to be John Durham.
Well, and I'm glad you made that clarification, although I trusted my audience, at least the conservatives in the audience, were smart enough to realize I was referring to the prior administration and the efforts that I believe actually go. Yeah, see, here's the thing, Frank, let me ask you the question this way. Do you think it would be possible for the kind of shenanigans and criminal activities, I believe, of top officials at the FBI, the DOJ, and some of the intelligence agencies to have gone off and done these things without some sign-off from people above them, perhaps as high above them as the former president of the United States, Barack Obama? I
don't know for sure. I don't think anybody does for sure. But I've talked with, as I suspect you have from time to time, at least, Joe DeGeneva, whose acumen on these things I respect enormously. And Joe pointed out to me recently that Susan Rice, in this kind of bizarre, cover your butt memo, I guess is the only way to describe it, that she wrote literally, apparently, within an hour or so of the end of the Obama administration, literally on Inauguration Day, this account of a meeting that she participated in which the president, Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, the FBI director, the CIA director, the whole litany, the director of national intelligence, she herself, of course, and others, were, I believe, in the White House, and they were discussing this apparent, cabal, shall we say. Yeah. She didn't use that term. That's mine.
Crimes.
Conspiracy, coup, whichever word you want to use. And she quoted the president, Barack Obama, as having said, "We did everything by the book."
Yeah.
Now, that suggests a certain degree of knowledge to me about what they did. I think it was, again, an effort to obscure the fact that they didn't do everything by the book, but it was their line, and she wanted it to be recorded for posterity that he said it. And I think it's an important insight into probably just how high up this conspiracy went, namely including the president. And, by the way, the vice president, Joe Biden, as well.
Yeah, and Frank, I think some of this is going to come up during the presidential campaign and not in a good way. The only thing, I guess, if you look at this thing from 30,000 feet, you say, how would somebody, say, within the CIA get away with leaking data, with faking data? How would somebody within the DOJ get away with it? It would only work if certain people, if a number of people all agreed to act in concert. Otherwise, part of the beauty of our system is that we have not only the interlocking system at the top, the courts, the legislative and the executive that counterbalance each other, but even within agencies, in theory, one cop can't get away with too much unless he's got a few other corrupt cops around him. And one person of the DOJ can't get away with going on a jihad against somebody using the power of the DOJ unless they have some other people around them, and some sign off from above, because they realize without that kind of protection, they do face possible criminal charges, and ouster from public office. So, it strikes me, you wonder, how could so many people in so many different agencies have acted in concert without some belief that the folks above them, who hold all the cards, like the president and his immediate staff, weren't saying, yeah, this is okay to do? Because I guess it could happen, but I don't think it's very likely.
Yeah, it's the most important question, arguably, of all. Who knew about this? When did they know it? And what, if anything, did they do about it? And I just wanted to commend to your listeners, and of course to you, Lars, a book that I'm very proud the Center for Security Policy Press published recently by my friend and colleague Diana West, entitled The Red Thread, a search for ideological drivers in the anti-Trump conspiracy. And what Diana documents in considerable detail is not just, who was doing what at which point, as best we've been able to reconstruct it so far. It's very helpful in that regard, too. But her principal contribution, Lars, and that goes to your question, is the motivations that were animating this seemingly rather large cohort of conspirators to act in concert. And the motivation she's established, I think persuasively, is these were revolutionaries. These were globalists who sought, as Barack Obama said on the eve of his first election, fundamentally to transform the United States of America. And they were well on their way to doing it comprehensively. Our economy, our culture, our media, our political, form of governance, and so on.
And transforming it in a way that it couldn't be undone. Frank, thank you. I'm up against the break. Frank Gaffney, founder and president of the Center for Security Policy.